This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Thank you for joining this week's NC Spin. We've got a good one for you this week that begins by asking who won the David and Goliath battle over the state health plan. We'll discuss statements by 4 of our former governors that partisan gerrymandering is hurting our state. And with college classes beginning, we wonder why only 35% of North Carolina college students graduate in 4 years, why it's taking many of them 6. And we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Speaking of the panel, this week we are joined by Howard Lee, former state senator and chair of the Board of Education, Chris Fitzsimon, the director of the Newsroom, John Hood, syndicated columnist and author, and Tamara Barringer, former state senator. Now we'll begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages from our underwriters.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
Today's tools make you a real DIYer, and as a member of an electric cooperative, you have lots of valuable tools to help you do it yourself in controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad.
Production underwriting provided by the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Let's get started. We've talked before on the show about the war that was ongoing between the state treasurer and large hospitals in our state. Dale Falwell was unable to get transparency in what hospitals charge members of the state health plan, so he developed the clear pricing plan and told hospitals what he would pay, urging them to sign up to cover state employees in 2020. They refused, and finally, Falwell agreed to sign up with the Blue Options Network of Blue Cross. Howard Lee, I wrote a column this week in which I said this was a modern-day retelling of the David and Goliath story, with Treasurer Falwell being David and the big hospital's Goliath. So in this story, did Goliath beat David?
I'm not sure that it's a beating outcome that we're witnessing, but certainly I admire Falwell's commitment to stand up and keep fighting for what he believed in. But I recognize the Hospital Association is certainly a strong entity. I consider it to be more of a compromise, and I think in the end the membership wins, but I don't see this as the end. I think it's an ongoing process that we'll be witnessing for some time to come.
Tamara, part of, I think, what triggered this was a letter from the North Carolina Association of Educators, which essentially urged him to throw in the towel and get on with this. Was that the pivotal point in your mind?
I don't know that that's the pivotal point in my mind, but what I am glad of, and I agree with you, Senator Lee, is that there needs to be a breather. I think that this is a complex issue, the health of North Carolina citizens, and it needs to be a process, not all in one fell swoop.
Howard was talking about how this it gets left. SENIC, the State Employees Association, was backing Falwell in this and urging for transparency. How'd they come out of this?
Well, I mean, thank goodness the state employees now can go to see their doctors at hospital or go to the hospitals and be covered in network. So I'm glad that there are thousands of people in North Carolina who rely on the state health plan who aren't going to be hurt by this because of the dispute. I think state employees are okay now. I do think we need to talk about this issue. I'm glad that it was resolved so people can get the health care that they need and they deserve. I do think that I don't think this was the right approach from the treasurer to sort of hold these things hostage and scare everybody to death. We need a thoughtful approach to do this. We need in-depth hearings. We need the public to be involved. We don't need just to issue a decree and then say you have to play this way. So I'm not even sure, and I'm not sure I would agree with how you've cast it. I do think the hospitals are very powerful, but the state treasurer has a lot of power too.
Well, so far as it goes, we've said that in fact, you've said on the show that the hospitals have a public image problem in North Carolina. Did this help or hurt that?
It didn't help them. I'm not sure it hurt them a whole lot more than they were already in the straits they're in. This is a situation where the state treasurer was looking for movement on two different things. And one of them was the actual rate schedule. He was trying to set rates at essentially by the final version around 200% of Medicare rates, give or take, and also transparency. It actually is the case the hospitals and the state treasurer might have met somewhere in the middle on the numbers. Hospitals don't want to give up money. And by the way, those who advocate Medicare for all need to really think about what just happened here, because these are double the rates of Medicare, and the hospitals saying that'll bankrupt us, that'll ruin us. So be careful. The Medicare for all stuff is completely unrealistic.
Under Medicare
of
for
course,
all,
you can force everybody to take a big pay cut, but that's the point of it. But that doesn't save money. The point is what they couldn't compromise on was it wasn't the numbers; it was the transparency piece. You can't. It's a sort of a yes or no question in a sense. Are you going to make some of this information available to the state treasurer and to the public or not? The hospitals are refusing. They're drawing a bright line here, and I think that issue, as Howard says, is not resolved.
I was going to say, transparency ultimately is going to come, is it not? I mean, we've got to do something so far as healthcare costs are concerned, and this is a part of it.
I am just absolutely baffled that the hospitals have dug in on the transparency issue. It seems to me it would be to their benefit to have this out so people can understand what they're getting into. But to dig in and not move on that, to me, I don't think helps the hospitals at all.
Well, the problem is, Tamara, as I understand it, they're charging one health insurance plan one rate for the same procedure, that they're charging another one, and then you've got the Medicare rate, and their rates are just all over the board, and to reveal all of this means that whoever the payer is going to want to say, I want the lowest rate. Is it not?
Well, of course they would. When I served in the Senate, I know we tried to tackle this issue of transparency. Transparency is very important, but as you just outlined, there are very many different rates. And so how do you even define transparency? But I am certainly a supporter, and we tried to tackle that. And as I said, this is a process, and I think that we need to go through the process.
So what we ended up with was we allow the state employees to use their current providers, network providers, doctors and hospitals. But now we're moving over to something called a Blue Options Network. And as I've had that explained, it's a difference between value-based health care versus fee-for-service health care.
This was a lot of what the dispute was about, at least from a hospital perspective. Their argument was we want to move away from thinking about things in terms of fees attached to services and towards a model where we deliver value measured by the quality of medical care or the quality, the health status of our members or our patients. And to simply talk about prices per procedure is a mistake. Now, I understand the argument they're making. The problem is it is very difficult to measure value-based care. It is challenging. There is a great risk that you're going to have such mushy measures that you're really not going to accomplish very much. So I think this is a good case where put things more on the table. I know people don't want to do that. You're right that they want to overcharge these payers, to undercharge these payers, and it's this whole elaborate Rube Goldberg machine. But it's got to be resolved at some point, and unless you want a Medicare for all resolution, which take everything down to the Medicare rate, hospitals would detest that.
Yeah.
Unless they want that as the ultimate conclusion, they're going to have to cut costs some other way.
Chris Dale Falwell says that this state health plan is incurring cost increases of between 5 and 9% per year, which over the next few years would amount to some $400 million and add about $1 billion to the $35 billion we already have in unfunded liabilities. Now, he said from the get-go, there are three triggers here. Number one, we can cut cost. Number two, the legislature and the state taxpayers can pay more for the state health plan. And number three, the beneficiaries, the state employees, are going to pay more. He was trying to charge, to change the cost factor. Is the calculus still there?
Well, I mean, we have a problem, but it's interesting. We're the Senate and the House and the governor are now talking about what to do with a $900 million surplus. We talk every week on this program about an unfunded liability of $35 billion or whatever. That's $1 billion. Every year we talk about it on the show. Every year we have money left over. Nobody wants to put that money toward that. That's number one. We just cut taxes in the last few years by almost $4 billion. There's plenty of ways to address this in an incremental way without costing people benefits or costing the hospitals. I don't disagree that healthcare costs are out of control, but as I've said on this program before, I feel like Treasurer Falwell's pulling one piece out of this giant stack. And if you pull one piece out without looking at the entire puzzle, the whole thing could collapse, and that's the danger of
But
this.
you've got to empathize with him. I mean, he's got a problem on his hands
Well,
here.
empathize with him, but I don't agree with his style. You don't come in a bull in a china shop and say, play it my way right now this year, nobody's going to get health care, nobody's going to sign up.
I'm not quite sure that's the way this started out. You're mischaracterizing this. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to take Dale's position.
Yeah, you
talked about this for more than a year.
He begged them to come to the table and tell him what they were charging. They didn't do it.
And I think that's absolutely a necessity this day and time. And I've seen too many examples of people going in for a procedure, I have no idea what the cost is going to be, come out and then get hit on the blind side with this high cost that they had no idea was coming.
It's about the only sector of our lives, isn't it, Tamara, that we don't have any idea what they're going to charge us.
That's true. And transparency is important, and we need to move in that direction.
And in fairness, it is a complicated issue.
It is.
It is not an all, black and white kind of issue, and it is difficult to discern.
We're talking about the big hospitals. What happens to the medium-sized and the rural hospitals?
Well,
and they're covered by the state health plan as well.
Well, and also the hospitals that do so much charity work.
Well, that's the other point.
They're in that group
indigent
too.
care, though, I mean, this is one of the crutches that hospitals always lean on. I got to tell you that, because I was in the state treasurer's office. It is a small percentage of their overall cost. It is not a major factor. Sounds good.
I don't know. I've seen Wake Med's numbers. It's tough for them.
It is a big number. There's no question about it.
And they provide the indigent care. Well, but they provide the indigent care for Wake County and surrounding counties. And so that's why we have to take this, and I agree with you, this has to be a thoughtful process because we're talking about people's lives.
And I said on the show some weeks ago, both sides are right and both sides are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the case.
I don't think they're winners or losers here. I think we have to work through it.
Let's switch topics. We discussed on the show that a panel of judges is deciding whether or not North Carolina's legislative districts were drawn to promote partisan gerrymandering, and 4 of our former governors spoke out against the practice, saying it was damaging our state. Democratic governors Jim Hunt, Mike Easley, and Bev Perdue were joined by Republican Jim Martin. Pat McCrory refused to join the brief that was filed with the court. Tamara, you're a lawyer. How much impact did these statements made by the governors have on the judge's decision? Any?
Well, Tom, the judicial decision should be based only on our Constitution, not on the statements of former or present politicians. I truly believe that.
And I think that my view about this is they are right that gerrymandering is a problem. They are right that we should do something about it. I think this particular brief did not help matters. For example, it argued that the legislature shouldn't even get its constitutional authority to redraw the maps. If the trial court strikes them down, that it could go straight to have the court immediately draw maps. The arguments they made were over the top. They didn't properly cite the precedents. I think this particular, also it was filed at the trial court level. And Tamara, isn't that a little odd? I mean, wouldn't you have done this when it got to the appellate court? Anyway, I agree with their sentiment. I know their heart was in the right place, but this is ultimately going to be convincing legislators to make a change. I don't think this helped.
Howard, Governor McCrory refused to join in this because he said he didn't believe partisan districting jeopardized the constitutional separation of powers, and that this gerrymandering deserved and demanded a judicial solution. Now, I seem to remember when Pat McCrory was governor of North Carolina, he took the legislature to court on separation of powers issues, did he not?
Absolutely. And I think to make that statement without some solid evidence is not fair. I think without a doubt this whole process of gerrymandering does impact in that area. And of course, I'm a victim of redistricting, but not necessarily gerrymandering. But I've find it kind of comical because each of these governors could have made strong leadership when they were in office to have caused this problem to go away, but nobody did. And I think what we're getting now is a second guessing outside of the system.
But Tamara, there's always been a push and pull between the legislature and the administrative branch of the state. When one party governs and is also the executive branch, there's a little less tension between them. There's always been a fair amount of tension, has there not?
Well, there should be. That's why we have separation of powers. That's the whole point. But again, the judicial process should be based on our Constitution, not on statements of politicians. I firmly believe that. Now, if you are a party to the suit, that's a different
People
situation.
can file amicus briefs. They
Well,
do that all the time.
well,
Maybe
that's
not
what
the
this
trial
was.
court, but I mean, they do have the ability and the right to do
that's
that.
what this was,
Just
as a
because you
matter of fact.
can doesn't mean you should.
But Chris, one of the things that they talked about, the governors talked about, was that with the new technologies available in computers and so forth like that, these districts can be drawn, first of all, very quickly, but they also can be drawn very cleverly so as to predict and control election outcomes. And that's what the governors say was going on there. Doesn't that sort of violate the concept of constitutional?
That's the argument. I mean, I think that's the fundamental argument. It's clearly wrong for a democracy. The question is, does it violate the state constitution? That's what this court's going to decide. That's what this North Carolina State Supreme Court is ultimately going to decide. I think that there's been for a long time, and many of us have been part of that movement, there's been a popular movement to change the way we draw districts for a long time. I think it needs to be changed. I don't know if the court's going to change it. We have to change it. I think in large part that's what the four governors were saying. And I was disappointed. Maybe McCrory maybe he didn't like this brief, I don't know, but he clearly spoke out against gerrymandering when he was governor. But now he's a talk show host and a political commentator.
Well, in fairness to him, I think part of what went on here is he is ultimately saying that it's not up to courts to fix the problem. The Constitution gives the responsibility of this to the legislature.
His mentor was Governor Martin, who did sign up.
Well, and so, but my question is, if the legislature won't fix the problem, then what remedies do we have, John?
Well, in North Carolina, we don't have a citizen-initiated referendum process, so to change the Constitution in some fashion, which I do think is the right answer, at least regarding standards for drawing maps, the legislature has to go along. Now, if the court, and we've seen, like in the Stevenson litigation in the past, we've seen that courts will intervene and they will impose, if necessary, new maps for one election cycle after the legislature fails to remedy. I think that is respectful of the constitutional separation of powers, but to go directly to a court remedy, which is what the brief argued and what others are arguing for, I think that's a mistake.
What else I thought was interesting, though, sorry to interrupt, this trial sort of showed the disingenuousness, I think, though, of the Republicans who drew the maps and the orders that when they said they didn't have time to draw the new maps. Then they had an expert witness who was so bad that they actually disallowed his testimony because he made so many factual errors and wasn't truthful. I mean, at the very least, I don't know whether we're going to rule against whether or not this is unconstitutional, but I think there was clearly some bad faith in the folks who put these maps together.
It seems to me like they're having a circular argument here. On the one hand, they're saying they're not going to fix this situation, and on the other hand, they're saying the courts shouldn't fix it.
Well, I think that's true, but I think the courts can certainly set the conditions on which the legislature might feel a little more pressure to get off its duff and go do something. At least that's what I'm hoping.
And I think, Tom, you're onto something. The legislature's argument will be stronger if they said the courts should not be intervening to invent standards that don't exist, but we're planning to do so. I mean, that would be a better argument.
And so that raises the question. We're pretty long in the tooth on this legislative session, which started back in January. And I know there have been a lot of bills that have been introduced, but there ain't a lot of action taking place as far as this redistricting is concerned. Are we going to have another election cycle with these gerrymandered districts, Tamara?
I can't predict what the legislature is doing or will do. I was there, I think we went into October one time when I was a senator. I don't know, but I'll just say again, it's for the courts to apply the Constitution. That's the test.
You've been saying all along it's going to be the year. This is going to be the year for redistricting. You still believe that?
I will stick to my guns.
It is worth noting, though, that the State House, the Republican State House, passed a redistricting bill in 2011. The Senate never took it up. Now some of the same House leaders have reversed themselves and said we no longer need independent redistricting.
All right. Well, I don't know how old we are today, but we've been talking about this issue since 1998
if you
when
can't
we first
remember
went on
how
the air.
old you are, then you're probably fairly old.
Well, I couldn't speak for everybody
Okay.
else. Well, it's mid-August, and a new academic year is beginning in our colleges and universities, and we want the panel to focus on an article that was recently released by the Governor James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal that asked why so many colleges have such low graduation rates. John Hood, the four-year graduation rate of North Carolina's public universities is only 35%. It's higher at private colleges, and the six-year rate is only 57%, and has become sort of the norm for undergraduate graduations. Is the problem we're not admitting students that are prepared for college, or the instructions?
This is one of these all of the above things. We do have some kids going off to four-year colleges who aren't ready to succeed there and would succeed in other places and other venues. We have problems with the cost. In some cases, outstripping the resources available. We've got students who are working while they're taking classes, or having parents who have children while they're taking classes, and that's also a challenge.
Chris,
and by the way, bad advising for many students. They actually
Yes.
don't know exactly
But
what
why
they're
are
supposed to do.
private colleges rates so much better? Is it because it's costing more to go to private college?
Well, it might be. I'd like to also see the breakdown of income by the students who were affected. What are the odds of if you have to work 2 jobs to get through as the cost of college is going up? It's much harder. I think it's probably worth pointing out that the rate at North Carolina public universities varies dramatically.
Yes.
From some of the universities from UNC Chapel Hill and NC State to
I was
non-universities.
just getting ready to cite that. Davidson, Duke, UNC Chapel Hill, Wake Forest, and Elon have the highest 4-year graduation rates. Colleges such as Livingstone, Shaw, Chowan, and North Carolina Wesleyan, the lowest. Is that because students are not properly prepared? They're not getting the adequacy of instruction? Yeah, you teach in universities.
I do, and have for many years. My experience has been that they are generally academically prepared, but the world is very complex now. When I went to school, we did graduate for the most part in 4 years because it was pretty much a simple situation. You went there and then you went home and took over the family business or whatever. Now, I mean, what 18-year-old now in a global economy really knows what they're going to be doing, how they're going to get there? My experience has been they are generally academically prepared, but they're not prepared to make those life decisions.
I forget
out of
which
the gate.
chancellor at NC State it was many years ago, but he just absolutely insisted that there be a standard curriculum for the first 2 years of college, and then they could move into their majors and so forth like that. One of the writers that wrote about this said that what we've got going on right now is that we've got a situation where the kids are getting the debt, but they're not getting the degree. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think that's true, but I also think we need to recognize that a lot of kids are going to college because they think that's what they're supposed to do. We have so built up the fact that you need to go to college if you're to be successful, and so they go because they think you've got to have that union card in order to be successful, when in fact they have no idea what they want to be or how they want to be it when they get there. Second part of that is I'm one of those 6-year graduate students who took 6 years to graduate, and my problem was that I had very poor nurturing and mentoring when I was in college to help me make decisions. And I think in our smaller schools, that's what we're finding to be a serious problem.
But this report, Chris, said that 96% of the students coming in either 2-year or 4-year colleges across the country and across North Carolina need remedial work. Now, that's a comment on our public schools, is it not?
Well, it is, and it is a comment on our public schools, although universities faced with this need to do a better job dealing with it. And I think that we're starting to see that at some of the universities. But again, this is an issue where I would say the poverty is still a significant issue. The schools that don't have as many resources probably aren't equipped to deal with the remediation for the students. So it's a complicated issue.
All right. We've talked about cost, and cost in this report was one of the more significant factors that they talked about cost of college. The legislature and President Spelling and the Board of Governors instituted this North Carolina Promise program in which UNC Pembroke, Elizabeth City State University, and Western Carolina lowered their tuition rates to $500 for in-state students per semester, and $2,500 for out. John, do we have any idea how well that's working?
There's been enrollment increases in those places, and including the out-of-state enrollment. The reason the number for out-of-state was brought down, these are places that are not too far away from neighboring states, and it pulls students in from other states. I think it's too early to draw firm conclusions, but obviously enrollment is up. I mean, UNC Pembroke is sort of busting at the seams at this point.
Which is a good thing, I would say.
Well, is it? I mean, that's an interesting question. I think it is too, but we've also heard on this discussion, and we hear every time we talk about it, too many people are going to college.
Wow.
I think it's redistributing the students from other campuses. That was the original argument anyway.
Can I beg to ask a yes or no question and hold it to that? There are a lot of people, the presidential candidates, saying we ought to have free college for everybody. Will this solve this problem, Howard, yes or no?
No.
John?
Absolutely not.
No.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, it's the time of the program we'd like to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. We want to remind NC Spin viewers who watch us on Sunday that UNC TV is conducting fundraising activities this week and next. So our Sunday airing will be at 5:30 a.m. It's not going to affect our Friday night airtime, and we'll return to normal Sunday airtimes in 2 weeks. And of course, you can always watch our YouTube version by visiting our website or subscribe to our podcast or YouTube channel. Anyway, tell us something we don't know, Chris Fitzsimon.
Well, unfortunately, we had 2 more mass shootings recently in the United States, in El Paso and Dayton. I thought the most stunning thing I've read in a long time, the Dayton shooter shot 26 people in 32 seconds. That's a weapon that shouldn't be on the streets.
Howard, tell us something we don't know.
I'm reading a book called Range, which I think is fascinating because it talks about people who are most successful when they have a variety of experiences.
Tamara, tell us something we don't know.
I'm going to be a grandmother this fall.
All right. John.
If you want to be a teacher in North Carolina, go to teachnc.org and find out how. It's a great website.
All right. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, sign up for our free weekly email newsletter. Give your feedback and read my weekly column. Visit our website, ncspin.com. And as I said before, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and to the YouTube channel to be notified of NC Spin next week. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
Today's tools make you a real DIYer, and as a member of an electric cooperative, you have lots of valuable tools to help you do it yourself in controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad.
Production underwriting provided by the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.